agents. What are they?
I don't think anybody knows, but I think everybody wants one. AI is a new level of abstraction. The machinery is producing as many bugs as humans, percentage wise, except that all of a sudden now we're writing way more code. There's a lot of tooling being built right now, and it's still not clear what's going to win. If I start something from scratch without specifying, it tends to be a Python solution. You have to express your intent. I don't think you can ignore this trend, and we all have to continue to figure out how to cope with this new transformation.
Do you see the next billion-dollar startup being built with only one or two engineers?
No.
Leonard, with AI reshaping how we build and run software, how do you think it's changing what it even means to be an engineer today?
Oh, it's a good question for us. We've been pondering that ourselves. Not only it's changing how we build software, but I spent a fair bit of time with our talent team here at Clari talking about how do we hire. When AI first came into the scene, we said we were actually filtering people using AI tools, right? But I think we crossed that Rubicon, we reached that tipping point. Use the analogy that you will, that I think the tooling is here to stay. And now the question is, how do you evolve your interview process for individual contributors, right? How do you enable them to demonstrate the ability to use the tools while still being able to evaluate them as software professionals? So we actually starting to not only enable that as part of our interview tooling for individual contributors, but also starting to figure out how do we retool our interviewers themselves. Because the way you evaluate somebody with full access to reasonably well-documented world's knowledge and ability to generate code, certainly at different levels of the software engineer, right? Junior, straight out of school, all the way to somebody with 30 years of experience, has to also be different and has to change. And I don't know if we have all the answers yet. A buddy of mine, Baruch Sadagorsky, and I did a recent keynote at the conference in Europe, and we were just talking about the fact that AI is a new level of abstraction. And I guess maybe the only parallel I'm looking at is if you look at the industry, we're wielding a more powerful tools every time we go through a different level of abstraction. One of my favorite quotes was, prepping for that keynote was, I will never trust a code that I didn't write myself, which was first heard by no other than Grace Hopper, one of the creators of the compiler in the 50s. We're facing this now, but the tools, if you look at the abstraction levels, continue, and I'm fairly positive we figured out as an engineers how to evaluate Java engineers versus assembly engineers, or how to work with folks that now run giant cloud formations over folks that used to rack and stack servers. So I think for me, it's about ability to express your intent. If there's one thing you learn by playing with those tools, and I've been certainly playing with them, intent becomes incredibly important. And ability to express that intent is also incredibly important. And we as engineers historically have not been the best as a profession, and I'm speaking of that as a trained extrovert. We haven't been great at being able to express ourselves in something but software. And I think it's very natural. I remember getting into software engineering because the deterministic machine that I could type something and make it do whatever I wanted it to do when I was 12 was much easier than convincing another human to go do something. But now we have to go and take those skills, and I think we as an industry still are all learning. If there's one consensus out there, this transformation, even though it's logical and it's coming faster than any other ones, right? If you look at compute, cloud, internet, mobile, all of them have taken more time. All of them have built a foundation for this, but it's happening fast. So we're all still making it up as we go. And I guess maybe to say the last thing about this, that's what makes this time in the industry exciting again. There's a big shift happening, and those that know how to learn will survive and adopt. And quite frankly, I came back to full-time gigs because I felt like AI in enterprise software was finally becoming real. And this is before ChatGPT. I've been at Clari for 2.5 years ago. And I came back because unlike a lot of my peers in other industries, like we go through a lot of transformations and shifts, and There's excitement to learn. So I think the answer is you have to express your intent. I don't think you can ignore this trend, and we all have to continue to figure out how to cope with this new transformation.
It is a transformation, and it's one thing I keep hearing now when we take on a new client or an existing client who's looking to hire a specific engineer is the concept of first principle engineers. The importance of now with this AI trend that there might be a bit of a difficulty for engineers coming out of grad school finding a way into the workforce versus the engineers who've been around for longer who understand first principles who are the more sought after talent today. Is that what you're seeing? Is that a common thread in your world?
It is certainly a thread because what I have seen, and I've seen studies that supported us again as we were prepping for the keynote, a good AI tool in the hand of a skilled craftsman. And at the end of the day, in software engineers, we're really not artisans. We're not engineers per se. We're craftsmen, right? It's a trade. It's not an art or a science. You know, in the hand of a skilled craftsman, the steam hammer is much more powerful than a regular hammer. But you still have to understand the fundamentals of shaping metal, right? Maybe that's the analogy I'll use. And on one of my favorite YouTube channels, this guy, Alex Still, like he was 19, I think, when he started, or 18, and he's just learning how to forge metal. And he has all the modern tools of for like the modern furnaces, the modern hammers, but you still have to understand the fundamentals of how the underlying technology behaves. In our industry, in software, compared to others, you know, we haven't been known to produce qualified engineers when they live out of school. So the question is, if AI amplifies your skill that you already possess, and you understand what we call in our keynote the art of the possible, because AI, to me, effectively, in my own interactions with AI, it's like working with a junior engineer. It will take the path of least resistance, and sometimes make it faster may mean remove validation, which probably not a good idea for production code. But the thing we're going to have to learn as an industry is how to impart those skills for the folks that are coming into the space, right? I think we faced a similar struggle during the pandemic when we're all remote, and as a leader you couldn't walk the hallways or walk the shop floor and see if somebody's struggling, right?
Mhm.
And we kind of figured it out, and I think we'll figure it out. I think the level of abstraction will have to be bigger, and understanding what you're abstracting over for a lot of jobs will be important. Maybe I'll go back to a story from like late 90s, 99, 2000. I was in Toronto, and Visual Basic programmers were all the rage. They were getting paid as much as any other software engineers. They're kind of gone. So I think fundamentals are still here, and the question becomes how do we as an industry impart those fundamentals? Because at the end of the day, like any other tradesman or craftsman, understanding the art of the possible means actually going through a journey of trying, making your own mistakes. And, you know, the difference between an experienced engineer and straight out of school engineer, they just have more scars on their back on what doesn't work.
It's interesting, right? It's a little bit like the Formula One concept. Is it the driver or is it the car? You know, what wins races? And to your point, you can have a phenomenal piece of machinery, but the driver and the skill and the experience matters. And I guess what you're saying is these are incredible pieces of tooling with AI, but the experience of the engineer matters and how you use them.
Absolutely. And on that incredible piece of machinery, you know, the hype is there, the reality is not there. There's a lot of research that says that, you know, the machinery is producing as many bugs as humans, percentage wise, except that all of a sudden now we're writing way more code. So I'm not sure that the quality of the overall quality of the solutions have improved. That's number one. Number two, if you talk to security professionals, the code is not necessarily secure. So, you know, those vendors are going to have a field day pretty soon. It's very timely for me as we were preparing for a keynote. We kind of landed on the fact that we're asking an LLM, which if you think about LLMs, they're stochastic, a non-deterministic system by design, right?
Hmm.
There's a temperature of randomness injected into the result. And yet we expect those stochastic systems to produce deterministic results,
Hmm.
right? Then in our keynote, we explore what else can we do. For example, we believe that testing is going to have resurgence. Like my vibe coded project on my laptop here has 100% or 98% code coverage because it's easy with AI. And
Hmm.
that's the only way to ensure that what starts a stochastic, non-deterministic system that produces quite ask the same prompt, you're going to get three results,
Hmm.
right? How do you produce what expected to be a deterministic software that behaves consistently at all times? Certainly in the space that I work in, and I spent my entire career in enterprise software. So, you kind of expect your pricing calculation to be deterministic. Otherwise, you're going to have some upset customers. There's a lot of tooling being built right now, and it's still not clear what's going to win. The industry is still being shaped. The big foundational model providers are getting into the space. OpenAI bought Windsurf, so they want to have it in-house. They launched a coding agent as well. Cursor taking a different approach. There's companies like Factory and Zencoder that are experimenting on building agents that run outside of the IDE. I think we're looking at the great unknown. We're still together as an industry, still exploring. And for me, this is actually one of the exciting parts of living in San Francisco. A lot of those explorations are happening in person. I remember when I moved to the Valley 20 years ago in 2005, one of the best ways to go learn about what's going on in the industry was this forum called SD Forum. This is before meetups were a thing. And they were running some of the best gathering of technologists. And I'm seeing a resurgence of those conversations because all of us are grappling with the same questions. Hiring, how do you use those tools? How do you take the best advantage of those tools?
Hmm.
Which tools make sense? It's frothy right now.
I like that. A couple of things to unpack. You said testing. So you saying that now with way more software being built and a lot more code, testing and quality assurance is going to have a massive implication, and there'll probably be more startups or at least more of a need of that piece of technology or those engineers who understand how to test the code and make sure the quality's there.
Absolutely. I think Karpathy tweeted this a couple of years ago. There's a tweet from him saying English is the new programming language. Shared understanding of what the product is supposed to do is now possible. Possible to folks that are non-technical, like product managers. I can go to a tool right now and say, hey, look at this use case, look at this piece of code, and describe this in plain English.
Mhm.
We can now actually write what is the tool, what the expected outcome in plain English. Before it used to be product manager writes the requirement, UX designer writes, like mocks it up, the developer implements it, and then somebody else to go test it. That whole intent to outcome chain, if you will. A lot of this now can be in plain English, a common understanding. So a product manager can actually go read the test and say, yeah, those tests make sense. So mastering the domain, going back to hiring, what do you do as an engineer in the age of the AI? Mastering the domain is going to become more important because much like I coded assembly when I was younger, I coded C when I was younger, but now we code in much higher layers of abstraction. There is a chance that the actual programming language that runs the machine is going to be another layer of abstraction and you will never look at it.
Mhm.
Now, there will be niche jobs to understand how those things work. We still have people that go deep, performance tuning folks, folks that have to deal with legacy systems. So I think understanding the abstractions and having the fundamental education and understanding how it works is going to be important. But I think the focus is going to shift at like to that higher level.
Mhm.
Because of that shared understanding and because the models are non-deterministic, yes, I absolutely believe that testing that an industry ignored as a concept for a while, and we had attempts. If you remember, if you've been around long enough, there was a resurgence at TDD, but it was tedious. Why? Because software engineers are outcome oriented. I didn't get into software because I wanted to write tests. I wanted to make the machine do things for me, right?
Yeah.
But you now need that because the models, or at least the models as they stand right now, need guardrails. And the guardrails are tests. And then the question becomes, how do you express them? I think the exciting thing for me as well for the profession, that both makes it possible for legacy code, and most engineers don't deal with the code they've written, right? You typically come in into a system that pre-exists. So it's much easier to extract the behavior and understanding, and using modern tools and leveraging them for testing should allow us to improve the speed at which the legacy software can evolve. Because the reason typically the legacy software doesn't evolve fast is you have a new cohort of engineers who don't have the safety nets in form of test coverage, who are trying to evolve a system they don't necessarily understand, and there is change failure. So I think this will allow it, and I'm seeing evidence of this in an industry. I was talking for some folks from well-known enterprise software brands who are talking about using tools like Open or Rewrite to migrate older versions of Java, older versions of library, all the things that we in the industry have been calling technical debt for a while, much faster because they can also leverage the modern tools and build the test safety nets to ensure that when they do this migration that they never had the humans or dollars to put on does not break anything important because you now have the safety nets that verify that things are important. And people that read my bio also know that I'm been an angel investor. Can I play in this space? In addition to being a head of engineering, I have some personal investments in kind of engineering tooling in this area. I was an investor in Atomic Jar, where a company now owned by Docker that was focusing on simplifying testing and test validation. I've been a long-time advisor and investor in a company called SpeedScale that also focuses on this area. And I think the demand for those types of solutions is going to continue to increase because the laws of physics are such, majority of the incidents, and I can tell you that as a recovering observability vendor as well, I led engineering for a couple of observability products start from some kind of change. 85% of the incidents start from change. The one that you and I talked about before we started this recording this morning at Salesforce and Heroku, according to the status page that I'm looking today, started with a change. And the question is, how do you make sure that when the rate of change increases, you don't increase your change failure rate or customer-facing change failure rate? So I think testing is going to go through another resurgence and maybe a renaissance of tooling and approaches.
It's interesting. It's what wasn't cool is becoming cool, right? Because it was the area of software development that engineers didn't, as you said, you don't write code. You don't go into this industry because you want to. What do you say? You wanted to go in to make the software do stuff rather than test whether it works.
That's right.
There's something else that you said that I'm keen to dive into a bit deeper. You're talking about the testing and how important it is, but as I think about this with AI, what would you say is the go-to programming language today for AI as a programmer? What would be? Is it Python? Is it Rust? What's the right language?
It's kind of interesting. I don't have data on this, and as an engineer, I typically am reluctant to speak without data, but I'll give you my personal experience. If you go and open one of the modern IDEs, whether it's Junie by JetBrains, Windsurf, now by OpenAI or Cursor, and you don't specify the language, the tools will default to Python. It's kind of very, very interesting to watch.
Wow.
I have a thesis as to why it is. I don't have any concrete evidence. I believe it may be happening because that's the training corpus, or maybe the folks that kind of, we all know that machine learning folks and the more recent stuff that was done in academia in this area of the last decade was done in Python. So maybe there's an inherent bias built into the model towards that language. I think the models are pretty good with all modern languages, but it seems to, at least my personal experience, the bias is in Python. I would be reluctant to say, it's going to work for this or that language. I think any language that had sufficient training data, i.e. mature enough, and it's not like as an industry we get a lot of new languages, like probably the two more modern languages that came out, Swift from Apple and Kotlin from JetBrains, and Go, like this, like we as an industry fortunately don't create. We used to create a lot of frameworks, certainly a lot of UI frameworks, and even that rate of evolution slowed down. I don't have a strong advice or a strong view other than my personal observation that if I start something from scratch without specifying, it tends to be a Python solution.
That's interesting. I mean, over at least the last 8 years, I've been more privy to finding programmers with Python than anything else. That seems to be the need. I'm seeing a new sort of need around C++ and Rust.
C++, I don't know about Rust. C++ makes sense for me. There's a lot of new low-level stuff that needs to be written because at the end of the day, the AI revolution rather is powered by hardware, and hardware does not like Java. You still have to go and deal with bare metals. I think the interesting thing for me about Python versus more mature languages is specifically was this, if the prevalence of Python will increase because the models prefer Python. I'm an old school Java guy, and not because I love how rigid the language is, but what people forget about Java is not just a language, it's also a runtime environment. An incredibly well-tuned, industrial strengths, hardened runtime environments, been hardened for almost 3 decades now, right? And one of the struggles I have, not with writing software, because that's just one aspect, but again, as a recovering observability vendor, and also as somebody who was fortunate enough to grow up since the early beginnings of the SaaS industry, I also have to go operate what I write. There are certain languages and certain platforms that lend themselves to ease of operations just because of the ecosystem of tools and the maturity of tools. How do you take a thread dump when something goes bump in production? How do you take heap dump? Do you have the tools to go analyze? Right. So it will be an interesting evolution and pressure on some of those platforms. And for those of you listening who are experts in Python, I'm sure I'll be somebody screaming at the podcast player right now, correcting me about all those things for other languages. But I think there's an aspect of language and there's an aspect of runtime environments and runtime primitives and ability to operate and scale all of this. Because there's one thing to write software, there's one thing to get it to an easy prototype. AI is pretty good at YOLOing some stuff that looks functional. The question is, how do you operationalize it, scale it, monitor it, support it, make sure it's secure, make sure it's tuned? So there's a lot of other non-functional requirements that languages will matter. Like I'm reasonably bullish in Kotlin just because it runs on top of the JVM. We don't have to go build a new runtime environment. So we'll see. Yeah, we certainly live in exciting times.
Definitely. Leonid, moving on to a separate topic, I'd like to dive into what you do today and how the future looks. But before we go there, there's an interesting question I'd like to ask. Do you see the next billion-dollar startup being built with only one or two engineers?
No, I don't, and I would love to be proven wrong because as an investor in public and private markets, that's a tremendous return on investment. Listen, the hype is strong, but building a company is more than just building the software. You have to service the customer. You have to go out to acquire the customer. We don't live in a vacuum, so no. And quite frankly, if you want to be really literal about this, I believe that single human every once in a while has to take a vacation or holiday. So maybe minimum two for N+1 redundancy. Will the teams decrease in size? Not unlikely, because a lot of stuff that required manual intervention can be now automated. Maybe a good example from an adjacent industry. Do you see a farm run by a sole person of the last 3-4 decades as automation has taken over that industry? I don't know. I don't think so, but I know the size of the individual farms has increased, right? The farmers work more land, but you still have to have certain skills, certain trades, and I don't think one human does it all.
It's interesting. I think the reason I asked this question is because I've noticed this trend, at least amongst one or two companies, where they are staying away from hiring and for the purpose of saying, look, we've got this one engineer, they can do the job of 10. Anthropic just came up with a new model and we don't need to hire more engineers. And I just worry, with that concept and what you said earlier on around the quality of the code, how do you build a startup that is valued at $1 billion or more, generating revenue, being successful without these functions that exist today?
I don't think you do that without those functions. I think those functions exist for a reason. Again, maybe I'll go back to my analogy of a farmer or another industry or another space I'm familiar with. Let's talk about pilots, right? There's been a conversation about like, hey, do we need 2 pilots on the flight deck for ages now? Right? I happen to be a private pilot, and I am my own meteorologist. I have to look at the weather. I'm my own dispatcher. I have to go do my own flight planning. I am my own pilot, obviously. I'm my own fuel. I'm my own handler. So yeah, it is doable, but it has a limitation of a scale. There's a reason United has dispatchers, fuels, ground handlers, baggage handlers, customer service agents, meteorologists on staff, flight planners. I think the disciplines are not going away. I think the ability to yield them is going to get better. Again, automation, if you look at history of automation, historically it made professionals more powerful. Again, going back to the analogy of Alex Steele, one of my favorite YouTubers, who is forging and making stuff in his own shop because tools are there, right? But I think for a certain scale, at least my intuition says, yes, things will become more efficient. Yes, the overall size of the teams will shrink, which, by the way, the role of the engineering leader will shrink. We're going to have to think about, as an industry, what does career progression mean for us? right? If your average span of control for first line manager is anywhere from 7 to 14, which is the max,
Yeah.
and you assume the team shrink, well, we're gonna have fewer managers. For some folks, the career progression is an architect to a management track after you reach certain seniority in our space. Like we're gonna have to rethink like the intrinsic motivation and where are we going and where do you grow professionally, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And do we need to start thinking about the profile of the individual we are attracting to be a software engineer? Was it from the art of war or is it all Chinese proverb, may you live in exciting times? Yes. We are living in very exciting times, and I don't know if we know all the answers.
Interesting. I was going to go into this segue to talk about Clari and RevOps in the future, but just before that, agents. What are they?
Excellent question. I don't think anybody knows. Salesforce rebranded Einstein as Agentforce, I think, almost a year ago. Everybody's launching agents. Are they assistants? Are they autonomous? Do they collaborate? I don't think anybody knows, but I think everybody wants one. And there are early promises even at Clari. So at Clari, we live at intersection of big data, AI, and helping our customers run their revenue better, right? Hence the T-shirt. I think there's a lot of things that now become accessible and automated. We're launching our own agents. We announced a number of things related to them in May, and they're in active launch around helping sales professionals do their job better. So we're starting with a couple of areas. One is a very tedious thing that every revenue leader has to go do called the deal inspection agent. I have a deal in commit. I don't have an economic buyer identified. Should it be in commit is a manual process right now. Or here's our stage definition, and here's what we want to ensure each deal adheres to is a manual process right now. And this is where a lot of forecasting calls and weekly inspections focused on.
Hmm.
As a head of engineering, I have the same question. I have a bunch of stuff in my backlog. Is it meeting all the key gates and goals that we have met? And do I have to go and review those by hand? So you would argue that kind of the current state of the heuristics are there to summarize that.
Hmm.
We're also looking at agents that look at cohort of deals. If you're a product, if you're an area leader or CRO, like the primary question you're gonna be asking every quarter or every week of the quarter, am I gonna miss, meet, or beat my number? And the most difficult question for those folks that have large sales teams, what changed in my inventory of deals? Sometimes you may have hundreds of opportunities, with some of Clari's largest customers, hundreds of thousands of opportunities concurrently, right? So we're building what we call a deal trend analysis or cohort analysis agent. Give you a weather update on what changed in a group of deals and how things, where should you focus? Because at the end of the day, I don't yet believe that the AI will replace the entire sales professional, but they will certainly make them much more powerful. Again, it goes back to AI as an amplification of expertise is an approach. We're a huge fan of Glean at Clari as well, using this in-house. They just launched agents at Glean, whatever their first customer event was. We're still intrigued. There's some interesting workflow automations which are super useful. So, like, I'll give you a use case for me. Instead of the account team prepping me for a customer meeting, I can self-prepare by saying, hey, I want the summary of what's going on with this account based on all data sources. I don't know what canonical agents assistance will be. I think we're still evolving this as an industry. The vendors are building tooling for this. We're starting to define levels of autonomy, much like we did for driving. If you haven't seen, like, the 5 levels of autonomy applied to agents as well. The important things for them to work is data, right? Like, if you don't have clean data, and for us, I don't need to tell you, as an industry, we've been talking data being the digital oil of our industry. I think we're finally in the position to go do something very, very interesting compared to my 25 years and 27, 28 years in the space now. We finally can do something interesting with this data. And we're starting to see results. But again, I also don't think the industry knows what an agent is, other than, it's the next new cool thing and you must have that in your product. And if you don't, you're behind. And if it's not part of your startup pitch, like AI was
Yeah.
over the last decade, you're probably not playing games. But I think it's also has some credence to it because I'm starting to see things that are real. And like in my personal life, I I don't know. Like you tell me, is me using ChatGPT to plan my upcoming weekend in Southern California a use of agent by using the deep research and inventorying all the events and all the schedules and trying to put together a trip schedule for me? I don't know.
I mean, it's as you said, it's data, right? It's what you feed it, and that information that you're getting around your planning your trip is a combination of all this data to give you the best plan.
I think it's more than data. You know, the word we started using at Clari is context, right? It's not just data. There's a lot of data on TripAdvisor to help me plan my Southern California weekend. But the context is what doesn't it like? How am I moving between places,
Hmm.
right? What are my key constraints? So I think it's more than data. I think there's an opportunity to elevate the discussion, and I think the folks that are going to win are the folks with context. You know, one of the reasons I think OpenAI recently launched an integration with my calendar and my Google Drive. It's not just data; it's context.
Hmm.
I think the most interesting thing, if you've never done this, there's much problems floating around the internet, is go ask ChatGPT about what do you know about me and summarize it as a CIA dossier or something along those lines. There's some very interesting things you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's context. It's understanding what you have done in the past and how to apply that context plus the data to what you're trying to do in the future, what will make the agents interesting.
It is super. I mean, I get the concept of concept or context. I guess what you're saying is when you're using this chat GBT or this AI, you're feeding it information, you're allowing it to learn you, get to know you. And in the span of a year, 5 years, 10 years, it's probably going to remind you, by the way, you did this or you ate this on this day and this is how you felt. But I guess the concern then becomes is how comfortable do people become with giving all this information about their personal lives to an AI?
Well, there was an interview with Sam Altman, right, where I think the answer is certainly the younger generations use those tools differently than any of us, and the conversations they have with them are more meaningful. You know, in an enterprise world, I think we have enough maturity and governance, and I lived this like 2005 to 2012 when we were convincing the world that this cloud thing is good for you and trust us will protect our data, your data with our lives, because the reputational risk for us of having a security breach much higher than for any one of our customers. On an enterprise data front, I think we're covered. The governance, the enforcements, kind of SaaS helped us with. You have ISO 20001, you have SOC. I'm sure there will be some kind of auditing standard, and like much like we have a security addendum to every enterprise agreement, I'm starting to see SaaS addendums emerge. Sorry, not SaaS, AI addendums emerge on every enterprise agreement governing the use of data. I think the enterprises will be comfortable because the yields are there, right?
Hmm.
There's a bang for the buck. And I think the same will apply to the personal lives. I travel a lot for work and I'm a huge audiobook listener and I struggle with finding the next book to listen. So, you know, was I comfortable saying, hey, ChatGPT, here's a copy of my Goodreads, look at what I've read here, look at all my ratings, and give me a couple useful, like, give me a book suggestion.
Hmm.
No, that was a compromise on my privacy worthy of the yield that I get in return.
Hmm.
And I've been actually using that as a use case for the last maybe 3 months, and I've been getting incredible book recommendations that seem to land incredibly well with me from the machine because it has the data about everything out there, which I don't possess, but it also got the context
Hmm.
on what I like, what I dislike, how do I consume the books, and what I'm looking in the next one. So I think context is more interesting than data, and it's much more encompassing. As I said, we at Clari, since we started talking about this, you know, we believe that, and we've been in this business for a while, we ingest a lot of various signal
Hmm.
about how the sales process or the process by which the sales was done evolves. So we know who did what when that led to what outcome. And then replicating that context, not just on one deal and assisting the deal, but also replicating that context across the enterprise is very interesting and quite frankly not dissimilar to what Elon has done with humans and Teslas, because effectively that's how FSD learned, right? Replicating who did what, when, and how. And over millions of miles, we as humans taught the machine to go, quite frankly, drive rather decently. I can get from San Francisco to South Bay without touching a steering wheel. 99% of the time. Waymo's, I don't know if you saw that, stats have exceeded the number of rides given in San Francisco. They just exceeded Lyft. So, and I'm sure similar things will happen in other industries.
It's interesting. Leonard, moving on to Clary. Let's. I know you touched on it slightly, but keen to get the audience to. I mean, a very well-known company. People know you, but just very quickly, if you were to speak to a potential investor today, day one of seed funding or seed Series A funding for Clary, what is the problem statement? What is Clary solving?
Well, for those of us that are listening to you, I'm wearing one of our T-shirts because Clari is also an apparel company masquerading as a software company. I have at least a T-shirt that I have a supply that can last me a couple of weeks. Our mission is to run revenue for every or help every B2B business in the world to run their revenue. And if you really think about enterprise software, which is my background, there's only three really, really giant markets: HR, financials, and revenue. Why? I cannot think of any business that can exist without something that helps them with each of those three, right? And I've been fortunate to learn that about HR when I was at Taleo and back in the SaaS way when we were convincing the world that the SaaS is here to do. And that's what I saw at Clari, right? It's a giant market, giant opportunity. We obviously don't do it for everybody, but we've been fortunate enough to help some well-known brands with the process of running revenue. And if you think about like what's the most important process in business, period, is revenue.
Yes, sir.
Clari actually, a lot of people don't realize Clari started like a lot of startups as a mobile app for a sales professional on the go. And over time that a mobile app evolved and became analytics. And over time we realized that if we wanted to help the folks run revenue, we need to know a lot about what's going on in the process. And the way we do it is we have an all-encompassing suite of products from revenue development to forecasting and all the processes of running the deal. And we ingest a lot of signal from our customers. We read every email, again, opt-in by a customer, but the more context we have, the easier it is. We record every conversation, transcribe it, extract sentiment of it, extract what we call revenue moments. For example, an objection could be a revenue moment. Identify financial decision maker can be a revenue moment. And we take all of those signals and we feed those into our forecasting models that both score the deal and analyze the deal automatically in background. And we use this data to both help you run your current quarter, because in revenue, most companies run on a 13-week cadence, one quarter, and then the cycle starts anew, but also get better at upcoming quarter, right? Because the bigger you are, the more sophisticated you are, the earlier you have to start thinking about your next quarter. And we use the signal in combination with modern AI technology and not as modern AI technology. Clari has been leveraging AI and process of revenue and forecasting for now probably 8 years. And we effectively try to help the teams get better. For some of our customers that are publicly traded companies, it's important for them to know whether they're going to meet, beat, or miss as soon as they can. They have to go guide the street. Majority of our customer, based on our own statistics, by week 5, 6 of the quarter, will get a plus minus 5% accurate forecasting projection on their revenue. That is incredibly powerful. Now, as I probably don't need to tell you, the way you close the quarter is not exactly how the quarter looked in week 5. And from that point on, we have a lot of tools that help our account executives, SDRs, leaders, figure out how to get that quarter to be what you want it to be. And we surface those insights. And as I talked a bit about earlier, we start putting some agentry to work to automate some of this or to surface the relevant data. My dream feature is a Monday morning, since we're on the podcast. Imagine a lot of our CROs that use the system, log into the system. And instead of them logging into the system to look at the dashboards, I would love to serve them a 5-minute tailored podcast, giving them a weather report on what's going on in their own inventory. So that's what Clari does. Again, our mission is to help our customers to run revenue.
So, Leonard, with that being said, you were talking about agents. What does the future for Clary look like as far as AI and the impact on AI on Clary, and how you could, I guess, look at new ways? I mean, I know you mentioned a few ideas in terms of when they log in and they see this little video to help them with their forecasting, but how can you use AI today to to forecast the future of Clary?
Well, Clari runs on Clari. To begin with, as you can
I was
imagine,
I was going to ask. I said, I'm sure you use it internally.
we are customer zero, sometimes to the dismay of the sales team that has to use it as their productivity tool as we dog food new capabilities. I think for us, AI and leveraging modern technology to in this space is not new, right? And even leveraging more modern approaches, large language model powered approaches is not new. Our first LLM based feature launched 2 years and a couple of months ago. Basically, within 60 days that from the moment we got access to OpenAI's APIs powered by Azure. And the first use case was very simple. It was descriptive AI. It was a beware tool, which is very common in sales suites, that summarizes the call, records, transcribes, and summarizes the call. And the first feature we launched is pretty simple. Let's summarize an hour-long call into something that you can go read if you miss the call. Let's chapterize it so you can go listen to interesting things, and let's extract what I call revenue moments from the call. We went from kind of very lightweight descriptive AI use case. Now everybody's used to it. Every call recorder has it. We went into generative AI by generating action items and starting to automate tasks like email follow-ups for a meeting. Hey, we just finished the email. Here's the action items. Here's the recording. Here's what we've agreed to. Right? Let's go get them out. And now we're moving to the agentic era by trying to figure out what to do with the signal. So for us, the future right now is continue to apply modern AI techniques to do both descriptive. We're setting a lot of interesting data. So Clari, about a year and a half ago, we publicly stated that over the life of the company, we helped our customers process about $4 trillion of revenue. Since then, we've obviously done more. We have about a petabyte of structured and unstructured data in our data stores, and our future is to continue to leverage the context that we build up and turn it into actions, whether it's descriptive, summaries, generative, outbound content, like a daily summary of the call, etc., etc. And now agentic with some of the automation that I've described, right? What's new in my deal? Does my deal meet my sales methodology? And I'm sure if you talk to me in about 3 months, based on how quickly the things are moving, we'll have other ideas. Mashing up our data with data that we don't have access to context-wise is another area we're actively exploring because we ingest a lot of data, we see a lot of revenue data, but by no means we are in your Slack if you're a customer or your teams or whatever the tool of choice. So we're starting to play with ideas on how do we both expose our context to other AI tools. A lot of our customers have their own AI initiatives, as well as how do we get access to additional context and insights that we don't see today to further improve what we do in our specific domain.
So, Leonard, with this being said, do you see a world where salespeople as a function becomes unnecessary if there are tools like this that exist and they're constantly improving and AI is evolving at such a fast pace? Is there a world where a customer no longer needs to speak to a human?
You know what? It's an interesting journey. I'll start with two anecdotes for you. And maybe I'll ask you a leading question. For us, name a software company that was famous for not having a sales professionals, and you would go buy. I was the buyer as a persona, everything self-service. Not founded here in San Francisco, founded on one other continent that used to have all the convicts sent to that. Atlassian, right?
Right.
Atlassian was the company that was priding themselves on not having sales professionals. Interestingly enough, I have an account executive at Atlassian right now. Agent Force, right? The primary, marketing push from Salesforce. I believe they said they're hiring 3,000 sales professionals to get this to the market. Now, the story is we have to explain. This is a new industry, so we have some explaining to do. I think it's going to be a mix, right? PLG as a motion in software has existed for a while, and this class of products you can buy without talking to a human. Like I didn't talk to a sales rep from ChatGPT. We're talking to an account executive from Windsurf, Cursor, and others, right? So yes, there is going to continue to be a move to take the human out of the equation, but I think the complexity with which we deal in our space, which is enterprise, will still require some kind of human and a human expertise because
Mm.
there's a lot of nuance, a lot of pattern matching that has to happen. Do I think the overall headcount numbers will shrink? Possible because the humans are expected to be more powerful, more
Mhm.
productive. And again, we've seen examples in other areas through have gone through revolution, but I think that the function is not going away at all, you know. And in my space, there are two approaches. There's an AI SDR, or there is an amplified SDR, and I've seen both, and some failed, some succeeded.
Mm.
I saw a very exciting demo at the demo day last week where a company, a current YC company, is building an effectively an all in a box solution for a small business.
Right.
Take a customer call, figure out what they need, write it all down, do the qualification, feed it to a business owner. So I think there will be areas where that's absolutely possible, much like there are areas where my Tesla is very successful at driving itself from point A to point B. And there are areas where I have to go take over the steering wheel.
Interesting. I think it's just the way I look at things as far as AI is concerned is people are now within engineering or sales or recruitment or HR, legal, doctors. I feel like we're going to get to a place where you have to be on the top of your game. You really have to be on the top of your game because, um,
Mastery matters more than ever.
mhm,
Domain expertise matter more than ever. Ability to express yourself clearly matters more than ever. You're quoting some of the conclusions from the keynote we were doing on kind of software engineering in the age of AI, but I think it applies to everything.
love it.
Expertise get amplified. Lack of expertise cannot benefit from this.
Because I do feel like the market has become like, at least in my industry, recruitment, right? It very quickly became oversaturated. Too many recruiters, too many
Sure.
salespeople. And it's great in a way because you could find a way to distinguish yourself. If you're an engineer, you're a better engineer, you're better at coding, or you have that growth mindset, you're a 0 to 1 talent. But I feel like as this industry continues to evolve with all these tools that we have to supercharge our abilities, the mediocrity just it's no longer acceptable. Like you have to be on top of your game, otherwise it'll be very difficult to find a place. That's how I see it, at least.
So the interesting question I will pose back at you then is success easier to achieve because all the cyber, even though you may start with nothing, the democratization of expertise should allow you to become an expert if you're willing to invest in yourself
Mm.
also fast because the knowledge, the best practices are codified and they're now codified through a usage paradigm that to us as humans is very comfortable.
Hmm.
Chatting to the AI and asking AI for help or clarifying what a particular very complex concept could be, it's like having a free expert coach. So the interesting thing for me, the counter to that is, yes, I agree with you. Mediocrity is not going to survive, but for people that are willing to not be mediocre,
Yes.
that may have not had access to ability to evolve themselves for various reasons. They're not in the right place in the world, don't have access to the right people. My old boss used to say, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows what you know, right? The question is, will some of this also get democratized?
I feel like it's good. It has its positives, and it is a little bit of the unknown as well, right? Because whoever I ask, nobody really knows where this is heading, which is exciting, but at the same time, there is a question mark there.
If you scan the, what is it, Mary Meeker 347 page report that just came out, there are some theses there, but even there, there's still a big unknown.
Outside of the business world, you're a busy man, you're an investor, and I'll put this all in the footnotes so people will be able to reach out to you if they're looking to join a company like Clari, or founders who are keen to speak to you about potential investment. You've seen it all. You've been in Silicon Valley for 20 years. You've been part of this amazing engine that we all pride ourselves to be part of. The serendipity and the beauty of it. We are both our relationship is based on it, which is amazing. And I thank you for that. But how do you compartmentalize all of this? What does life look like for you outside of this? Like, how do you, for people who want to be where you are, who are thinking about starting a company or thinking about leading engineering at a successful company like Clari, how do you compartmentalize the busy world and keeping everything sane outside of work?
It's hard. And I think one of the advices I give to folks, and it's classical advice, follow your passion, but we're in an incredibly competitive industry with an incredible amount of smart people who get attracted to this industry, and even more competitive and smarter people get attracted to Silicon Valley. My personal both falling and success reason is probably the same. I'm incredibly passionate about what I do professionally. I just love what I do. And it's lucky. I know a lot of my friends from high school who will not be in the position to go follow the passion, right? So you have to be passionate about what you do, number one. Number two, you and I talked for almost an hour about how quickly this industry is changing and that the change is constant. You have to be willing to learn. The way I did software engineering when I started in 97, the way we were doing it in 2005, the way we're doing it in 2015, the way we're doing it 5 years ago is not the same. So you have to be able and willing to invest time in yourself and have a setup in your personal life that allows you to always be learning, or you're going to stay behind. And it's hard. And my personal failing is it's hard for me to go separate the professional from personal. 3 of my evenings this week are hijacked by some local events where a bunch of people are going to get together and geek out on the conversation you and I just had, the future of AI. What do we do in resurges? What's going to happen for this particular space? So I think you just have to be deliberate about that and understand that it's a trade-off. And it's okay that it's trade-off. It's not for everybody. But if you're aspiring for a certain level of achievement in our industry, understand that it's competitive. We attract people from all over the world. Silicon Valley certainly attracts people from all over the world, and you get some of the best coming here. So you have to be willing to compete in this league. And if you're not, that's also okay.
I agree. I think that's the reality of it. The market is getting more competitive, and you just got to elevate your game constantly, educate yourself in the interest of educating yourself and keeping your finger on the pulse. I'm an avid reader. I believe you are too, from what I've, for the time that I've known you. And as far as reading is concerned, when it comes to being a engineering leader or an IC who really wants to elevate their self, take on your advice and continuously learn, or a founder who's about to start a company, is there a book out there that you've read that has truly resonated with you? One that gives you, when you think about it, you think, that was a great book. I wish I had read it sooner. I wish it had existed sooner, and one that I would recommend any of my founders in my portfolio. What would it be?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to respond with two. One, and that's a book that I read probably 10, 15 years ago. I still reread every few years. But now that ChatGPT is there, I just tell it to follow guidance from that book as I think about how I deliver my message. At the very beginning, I told you I was an engineer once, and I'm a trained extrovert. My favorite book that helped me was communication skills, because my job is now leading a group of non-deterministic variable feedback time machines called humans, is a book called Made to Stick. Great authors, great book, and it helps you with a framework on getting your message delivered and stuck, because at the end of the day, those machines, unlike computers, don't always listen. And the second one, especially in the time of change and in the time we go through industry, is a book by Daniel Kahneman, who's unfortunately passed away, Thinking Fast and Slow, System 1, System 2 Thinking. And how do you, to your last question to me, combine ability to be intentional and strategic about what you do while still dealing with all the tactical things that you have to deal to succeed?
Leonard, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. It's, you and I have known each other for a couple of years now. It's always been a pleasure working with you, and we've exchanged deal flow over the years. I think you're someone that I would always go to as far as a advice on what would be a great opportunity to invest in. I'm sure you're open to founders reaching out if they're looking for advisors, or if they are looking to raise their next round of funding. What would be a good place to reach out on LinkedIn, I assume?
LinkedIn is the easiest place to find me. I'm at /L Igolnik, or just punch in my name, drop me a note, and we'll see where it goes.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Inside the Silicon Mind. This podcast is powered by Harrison Clark. For more episodes, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. As always, stay curious, stay consistent, and stay inside the Silicon Mind.